to information recovery for individuals, as important as that is. So can I ask my right honourable friend, how will he ensure that ICRA works with key stakeholders in order to foster cross-community reconciliation in Northern Ireland?
Well, my honourable friend raises a really important point, and I would say to him that enabling families who have suffered for so long and not found answers to what happened is a fundamental part of enabling the process of reconciliation in Northern Ireland to take place. And the truth is we have to work on both.
Julian Smith.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State knows that I agree with many aspects of the repeal of the Legacy Act. But the Policy Exchange report this week, and as the newspapers have stated this morning, raises some significant concerns about the repeal of Section 46 and 47 in that Act. Can I urge him to return to the previous cross-party position that we have to block compensation payments to terrorists such as Jerry Adams?
Bruce Day.
Well, I have indeed seen that report, and the problem is that the approach set out in the Legacy Act, in this respect and many others, has been found to be unlawful. Unlawful. Now, of course, as the last government did, we will continue to see if we can find a lawful way of dealing with the issue that he has identified, and that work will continue.
Gregory Capp.
Mr Speaker, does the Secretary of State agree that the job of the Commission in helping people to deal with the past is made much more difficult when we have incidents like when the Sinn Féin First Minister Michelle O'Neill reprehensively spoke and attended a commemoration of 3 IRA terrorists who died when the bomb they were transporting through County Londonderry in 1971 exploded prematurely, killing them rather than the innocent people they intended to murder, and now the possibility of former Sinn Féin leader and terrorist Jerry Adams may be about to receive compensation.
I say to the honourable gentleman that, as I alluded to a moment ago, the process of reconciliation and coming to terms with the past is a difficult and itself a troubled process. And lots of people have been on a journey, and we need to continue to see that journey followed. People will express their views about the stance that different people have taken, but I welcome, since he mentioned the First Minister, the fact that for the first time she attended the Remembrance Sunday commemorations.
I've not looked at the Alex Bogart, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'd like to return to the question just raised by my right honourable friend, the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. The fact of the matter is that in the case of Jerry Adams, when the previous government passed its legislation, the Labour Party was in favour of the amendments made in another place, which ruled out compensation to people like Jerry Adams and others similarly detained in the 1970s. Why has the government now changed its position?
It is the courts that have found those clauses to be unlawful. And the fact of the matter is that the last government passed legislation to enable terrorists to get immunity. The last government passed legislation to deny people in Northern Ireland the right to bring civil claims, including against terrorists. The Conservative Party has never apologised for doing both of those things. It's about time that they did.
Let's return to the matter of Jerry Adams. The Secretary of State, and I'm sorry to say I must correct the Secretary of State. The High Court found that, those provisions in the Legacy Act were unlawful. But it is well within the Secretary of State's power to appeal that judgment. He has dropped that appeal. And I don't wish to teach the Secretary of State to suck constitutional eggs, but he will know full well that it is also within the sovereign power of this Parliament to give legal basis to the Carltonal doctrines which have been in place since the 1940s. Or would he rather pay compensation to Jerry Adams and people like him?
Nobody wants to see that, but the Supreme Court judgment the Supreme Court judgment which ruled that the interim custody orders following internment were not lawfully put in place, in which the Carltona principle was much discussed, was in 2020. The last government did nothing about that for 3 years until they belatedly accepted an amendment in the House of Lords, which has now been found to be unlawful. It is a complex and a difficult question. The last government found it difficult, but we will continue to follow the same path that they did to see whether it's possible to discover a legal means of dealing with the problem he has identified.
Chris Minns.
Number 5, Mr. Speaker.
Minister. Secretary.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 5, 7, 9 and 10 together. The Government's mission is to encourage growth in Northern Ireland through increased investment, job creation and higher living standards. The Government is working closely with the Northern Ireland Executive to develop Invest 2035, the UK's modern industrial strategy.
Chris Minns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I thank the Secretary of State for his response. Northern Ireland's economy has strong and dynamic sectors, from agri-food to aerospace, to shipbuilding to cybersecurity. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that actually Northern Ireland has a vital part to play in the industrial strategy?
It certainly does, and my honourable friend alludes to a number of the great strengths of the Northern Ireland economy. The deal with Holland and Wharf I referred to earlier is another sign of the Government's commitment, and of course the Northern Ireland economy has access to both the EU and the UK market.
Alan Gamble.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State share my optimism that UK Government funding for all 4 Northern Ireland city and growth deals confirmed in the autumn provides a great basis for all of Northern Ireland to generate growth and opportunities?
I certainly do, and I've been greatly impressed by the commitment of those involved in developing the growth deals to invest in boosting economic growth in their areas.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Secretary of State update the House on what recent discussions he's had with the Executive about steps to take to increase revenue in order to help deliver longer-term financial sustainability to help grow the economy in Northern Ireland?
I have had a number of discussions, Mr. Speaker, with the Executive on that subject, and I'm pleased to see that the draft budget for next year contains a plan to raise further revenue, which will meet the £113 million requirement that was part of the budget restoration agreement. It is really important the Executive raises additional funds to meet the challenges of improving public services.
Dan Aldridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are many dynamic tech and digital companies at the vanguard of the mission for economic growth in Northern Ireland. Does the Minister agree with me that these industries are critical to Northern Ireland's economic future? And what steps are being taken by the Government to support these industries to grow to their full potential?
Well, there have already been discussions with businesses in Northern Ireland about the part they can play in the industrial strategy, but cybersecurity is a really good example of a huge strength of the Northern Ireland economy, where many companies, including from the United States of America, are investing because of the skill and expertise that is to be found there.
Saoirse Eastwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Secretary of State and the Minister for their responses so far, and indeed in one of the responses I note that Northern Ireland was highlighted as having dual market access. So on that basis, would the Secretary of State and Minister agree with me that initiatives like the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor in my constituency of Lagan Valley need supported so we can make the most of our economic opportunities?
I do indeed think that the Belfast Economic Corridor is a really good thing. We support it, and I look forward to seeing it develop and succeed.
Jamie Stowe.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Agriculture is really important to the economy of Northern Ireland. In Scotland, we breed excellent bulls, but it's very hard to sell them and get them into Northern Ireland because of the regulations and red tape, and vice versa for Irish bulls coming to Scotland. Could I ask the Secretary of State to see if we could make it a bit easier for farmers on both sides?
I will look into the matter that the honourable gentleman raised, and I will come back to him.
Jim Allister.
This week the Prime Minister has spoken of the unbridled economic opportunities in developing AI. But of course, it is not an unbridled opportunity for Northern Ireland, because instead of living under British regulations that affect the AI, we live under much more restrictive EU regulations. So when would the Secretary of State move to release Northern Ireland from the restrictions of foreign jurisdiction under the EU?
Well, I say to the honourable gentleman, the substantive provisions of the EU AI Act do not currently apply in Northern Ireland, would only apply following an agreement in the withdrawal agreement joint committee, and any decision would be subject to the democratic safeguard mechanisms in Schedule 6B of the Northern Ireland Act 1998.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his union connectivity review, Lord Hendy, now a minister in this government, identified that upgrading the A75 would have significant economic benefits, not just for Northern Ireland, but for the whole of the United Kingdom. There was another fatal accident on that road in my constituency last week. So will the Secretary of State join with the Secretary of State for Scotland to put pressure on the Scottish Government to finally move on upgrading this vital economic route?
Secretary of State.
It is indeed a vital economic route, and like the honourable member, I look forward to seeing it improved, not least in the interest of safely as quickly as possible.
Sammy Wilson.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The updated EU General Product Safety Regulations largely formalises how businesses are already operating in the UK, and the majority of businesses have adapted to continue trading within the UK and with the EU. In December, the Government published guidance for businesses on the application of the regulation in Northern Ireland. The Secretary of State has this week met with ministerial colleagues and will keep this under review.
Sammy Wilson.
As a result of these EU regulations, thousands of consumers in Northern Ireland are denied goods from GB, and rather than adapt, businesses in GB have simply abandoned the Northern Ireland market. At the same time, this week, DEFRA has banned the import of meat from Germany, where there's been foot and mouth disease outbreak, but has not extended that ban to Northern Ireland because of the Northern Ireland Protocol. While the EU protects its market, the UK appears to have abandoned the internal market of its own country. What is the Secretary of State going to do to redress this?
This government is absolutely committed to ensuring the smooth flow of goods across the UK internal market. We understand under GPSR that for many companies they've adapted easily, it's more difficult. The Secretary of State has met with the Minister of Business this week about further guidance and assurance, and is continuing to do so.
Treasury Fox.
Question number 8.
Minister.
There are many pressures on businesses that we are constantly assessing and talking with businesses about. Job creation in Northern Ireland, the member is right to raise. It's a priority for this government, and we are supporting businesses in many ways, including through Invest NI's fund for small businesses and through directly supporting job seekers through funding for employment support schemes.
Ashley Fox.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the warm welcome. How does the Minister expect businesses in Northern Ireland to grow and invest in their communities, given they have to pay the enormous tax increases imposed by the Chancellor?
Minister.
Even after accounting for employer national insurance contribution impacts, the Office of Budget Responsibility expects level of real wages will raise by 3% now. Raising the revenue to fill the £22 billion black hole requires difficult decisions, but they will result in improved public services, which is good for all people in Northern Ireland.
Dole.
Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
I welcome the industry-led deal that will see Navantia UK purchase Harland & Wolff's 4 shipyards in the UK, including Belfast. The Government has worked closely with Navantia UK to secure the future of the yards, the Fleet Solid Support Programme, and around 1,000 jobs across the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend share my optimism that now the future of the Harland & Wolff yard has been secured, the yard itself will be able to secure future orders?
I certainly do, and that is one of the great benefits of the commercial agreement that's been reached by Navantia to buy Harland & Wolff, and the adjustments that were made to the contract to ensure that the Fleet Solid Support ships could go ahead. This is a great facility, and it is open for business, including for other orders.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, one of my companies in my constituency of Strangford is one of the people who will suffer because of the administration of Harland & Wolff. In particular, this small family firm, and I won't mention it all for Hansard, will lose £500,000 of money. Now, the impact upon them and others is quite catastrophic. Can I ask the Minister what can be done to help those companies through the administration of Harnett Wolff who will find themselves either not able to trade in the future or losing entirely?
I do recognise the concerns which the honourable gentleman has raised. This is the product of the failure of the old Harland and Wolff, but it now falls to Navantia excuse me, to decide which of those invoices they wish to pay, and they will want to secure a relationship with suppliers who will be contributing to the Fleet Solid Support Ship programme.
Right, before we come to Prime Minister's questions, can I welcome in the gallery the Speaker of the Assembly of the Republic of Albania, Mrs. Ilse Spiripoli. Right, let us start with questions to Prime Minister Joshua Reynolds.
Question 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know members across the House will want to extend our thanks to President Biden for his steadfast leadership and warmly congratulate President-elect Trump ahead of his inauguration. Mr. Speaker, in my conversation with President-elect Trump, we've underlined our shared commitment to the special relationship in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, this week we launched our AI Opportunities Action Plan, which will ensure we seize the opportunities of AI to benefit working people as part of our plan for change. That will boost productivity, transform public services, deliver £39 billion of investment and over 13,000 jobs. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With almost 4.5 million entries and exits in the last year, Maidenhead train station is a busy transport hub. But with crowded gate lines, flooded underpasses and a drop-off facility that isn't fit for purpose, the station needs major upgrades to give Maidenhead commuters what they deserve. So does the Prime Minister understand how Maidenhead residents face at the station, and will he commit his government to fixing these issues in this government?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank him for his question, and I'm pleased that his constituents are benefiting from the upgrades at the station, including, I think, new lifts to make the station fully accessible. The issues he raises are faced by passengers right across the country, and that is why we're bringing rail services back into public ownership, setting up Great British Railways and making ticketing simpler and fairer to ensure a better service for all passengers, including in his constituency.
Lashaba Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited Mid-Kent College, which serves my constituency of Gillingham and Raynham, and where valuable construction skills are taught to young people. However, I was also informed that the college faces significant challenges in recruiting teachers to deliver those courses. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that proper skills training and having the teachers necessary to deliver it is absolutely vital to growing our economy and building the homes we need for the future? And will he agree to set up a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the recruitment challenges that some colleges face?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, skilling up the next generation is, of course, vital to kick-starting economic growth. And our plan for change will rebuild Britain by delivering 1.5 million new homes. That's why we've established Skills England, reforming our planning system and training the workforce. And I will ensure that she gets the meeting that she wants with the relevant minister.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Birrell.
Mr. Speaker, on Friday, while borrowing costs hit levels not seen since Labour was last in government, I met business owners and their employees in Chesterfield. One of them told me that his business will not exist in 4 years' time because of this government's policies. It might not even exist next year. The Prime Minister may try to blame his inheritance or blame global factors, but why should anyone trust a word he says over the businesses who are saying again and again that his budget means fewer jobs, lower growth and higher borrowing costs?
Mr. Speaker, as you know, the global economy is experiencing volatility and higher borrowing costs. That is why it was vital that we took the tough and right decisions in the budget to get our finances back in order. We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole that they left. We made difficult cuts, raised taxes to invest in health public services and housing, vital to stability, vital to growth. And we've got an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules, and she will welcome, no doubt, the inflation figures from this morning. But contrast that with the party opposite. They weren't brave enough in government to take those difficult decisions. They've opposed all of our measures to stabilise the economy and promote growth. They're back to the magic money tree. She wants all the benefits of the budget, but she can't say how she's going to pay for them. They haven't changed. They're still economic vandals and fantasists. Imagine where we'd be if they were still in charge.
Mr. Speaker, just today, the British Retail Consortium says 2/3 of businesses will have to raise prices to cope with his tax hike. His Chancellor ignored all the warnings and ploughed ahead with an unprecedented borrowing spree, leaving all of us more vulnerable. Now we have businesses saying they will raise prices to cover his jobs tax. We have an energy policy that will drive up bills, and all the while we are spending more day to day on debt interest than we do on schools and universities. The Prime Minister refused to repeat his Chancellor's promise that she wouldn't come back for more. Will he now rule out any new tax rises this year?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we took the right and difficult decisions at the budget. Decisions that they did not have the courage to take, which left us in the mess in the first place. When it comes to tax, she knows very well the limits of what I can say from this dispatch box, but we have an ironclad commitment to our fiscal rules. We can't just tax our way out of the problems that they left us, which is why we put in place tough. They were howling at the spending decisions. They wouldn't take them, and we'll stick to those spending decisions. And our focus is absolutely on growth. But their record, they flatlined the economy. Their record, they flatlined the economy. A mini budget that crashed the economy. Worst cost of living crisis in living history, and they left a £22 billion black hole. Not taking lessons from them on the economy.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows very well the OBR found no such black hole. And he talks about a budget 3 years ago. The borrowing costs last week are at a 27-year high for 30-year gilts. The Chancellor is apparently promising to be ruthless in reducing spending. Let me suggest something that he should cut. There is no way that we should be giving up British territory in Chagos. He is rushing a deal which will be disastrous and which will land taxpayers with a multi-billion-pound bill. Why does the Prime Minister think British people should pay to surrender something that is already ours?
Mr. Speaker, we inherited a situation where the long-term operation of a vital military base was under threat because of legal challenges. The negotiations were started under the last government. The then Foreign Secretary came to this House to say why he was starting negotiations and what he wanted to achieve. And he said the aim was to, quote, ensure the continued effective operation of the base. That is precisely what this deal has delivered.
Mr. Speaker, there is no one he can blame for this dud deal except himself. At the budget, Labour were congratulating themselves for having the first female Chancellor, instead of ensuring the country had someone actually qualified to do the job. The Prime Minister...
I want to hear... Sorry. I want to hear the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims he has full confidence in the Chancellor, but the markets clearly do not. Yesterday, the Chancellor repeated her promise to have just one budget per year to provide businesses with certainty. The talk in the City is that she can't meet her fiscal rules, and there will need to be an emergency budget. So does the Prime Minister stand by the Chancellor's commitment that there will be only one budget this year?
Prime Minister.
She'll be pleased to know the Chancellor will be in place for many, many years to come. She'll outstrip them. Mr. Speaker, if we all thought the politics was about cheap points, I could criticise their chancellors, but I don't have enough time to go through all of the chancellors that they had. We have one budget, that's what we're committed to, strong fiscal rules, and we'll stick to them, unlike the party opposite.
Mr. Speaker, at a time of turmoil in the markets, the Prime Minister was distracted by the crisis around the former City Minister. What does it tell us about his judgment that yesterday he said he was saddened that his close friend resigned? This was an anti-corruption minister under criminal investigation for corruption. Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner advising Bangladesh, said London properties gifted to the former City Minister may be proceeds of robbery. So, will the Prime Minister offer Bangladesh the full support of our National Crime Agency in ensuring that any properties bought with stolen funds are properly investigated?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the former City Minister referred herself to the independent adviser. He found, as she well knows, there was no breach of the code. He knows that he found there was no wrongdoing, and the former minister fully cooperated. She referred herself a week ago Monday. I got the report yesterday, and she resigned yesterday afternoon. Compare that with the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who breached the ministerial code. Her predecessor, Batu, ignored it. It was the adviser that then had to resign because he wasn't taken seriously, and she's now serving the leader of the opposition. What a contrast. Thank God the British public chucked them out.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer the question about the National Crime Agency. No answer to investigating dodgy Labour ministers, just as last week he didn't want an inquiry that might expose dodgy Labour councils. The Prime Minister knowingly appointed a convicted fraudster as his Transport Secretary. The anti-corruption minister he had full confidence in only days ago resigned yesterday in disgrace. He is negotiating a secret deal to surrender British territory, and taxpayers in this country will pay for the humiliation. Now it turns out his government may write a cheque to compensate Jerry Adams. This is shameful. We left him the fastest growing economy in the G7. In just 6 months, under his leadership, it's been taxes up, borrowing up, mortgage rates up, and that's not all. Business confidence is down, jobs are down, growth is down. Can the country afford 4 more years of his terrible judgments?
Mr. Speaker, among that barrage of complete nonsense, there is one point that I need to address, because it's the Legacy Act, and it will be of real interest across the House. That Act was unfit because, or not least because, it gave immunity to hundreds of terrorists and wasn't supported by victims in Northern Ireland, nor, I believe, by any of the political parties in Northern Ireland. The court found it unlawful. We will put in place this is a serious point. We will put in place a better framework. We're working on a draft remedial order and replacement legislation, and we will look at every conceivable way to prevent these types of cases claiming damages. And it's important I say that on the record. But as for her claim and her nonsense, they crashed the economy. Mr. Speaker, I got a letter this week from a Tory voter in a Labour seat. I hope they don't mind me saying who it was. It was Liz Truss. Mr. Speaker, it wasn't written in green ink, but it might as well have been. She was complaining that saying she'd crashed the economy was damaging her reputation. It was actually crashing the economy that damaged her reputation. Mr. Speaker, what have we heard? All they've got is complaining. No defence for their sorry record. They don't even acknowledge it. No ideas, no policy. They're like a blank piece of paper, blowing hopelessly in the wind. No wonder the country put them in the bin.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Patients in Kent are experiencing a winter crisis resulting from years of underinvestment in our NHS. Many are having to be treated on trolleys in corridors with cases of winter flu and other viruses, providing a significant challenge to local health services. What assurance can the Prime Minister offer my residents in Dartford that the reforms and extra investment set out by the Secretary of State for Health will make this inadequate care a thing of the past, and would he visit Darrant Valley Hospital in Dartford with me?
Prime Minister.
Well, thank him for raising this, and I'm deeply sorry for those receiving inadequate care in his constituency. The last government left the NHS in a critical condition, but you can't deliver growth with record waiting lists, 2.8 economically inactive. Our plan for change, investing in the NHS, diagnostic centres, and I will, of course, consider his invitation.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I echo the words of the Prime Minister about President Trump, and hope both his team and the team of President-elect Biden can work together to bring President-elect Trump and President Biden can work together to bring the peace in Gaza we so desperately need, so the hostages can be released, we can get the aid in and the killing can stop. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member for Dartford just said, patients are suffering through the worst NHS winter crisis on record. Last month alone, 54,000 people waited more than 12 hours in A&E. Over 63,000 were stuck in ambulances for over an hour before they could even get into hospital. So there's no doubt the flu season has made the winter crisis worse. But we see these winter crises year after years of neglect of the NHS by the Conservatives. NHS leaders say we will never put an end to these winter crises unless we fix the crisis in social care. Now, I asked him this question last week and I was disappointed in his replies. I'm going to try again. Will he scrap the 3-year timetable he's given to the Casey Commission so he can fix social care this year and implement the reforms by the end of this year at the latest?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the talks towards a ceasefire, we are encouraged by the talks. I think the whole House would urge all to come to an agreement and have the hostages released. We all understand the absolute torture that their families are going through every single minute, every single day that this continues. So we hope that there can be progress there. In relation to the NHS, he's absolutely right. The party opposite left it on its knees. There's no point groaning. It is absolutely disgraceful that the NHS was left in the state that it was in. Absolutely disgraceful. We are investing to turn that around. We are reforming to turn that around. We are within that reform dealing with social care. I set out the timetable to him last week in the way that he knows it's set out.
Sir Ed Davey.
Speaker, I'm continue to be disappointed by the Prime Minister's position on social care, and I'm going to keep coming back to this issue because unless we fix it, we won't fix the NHS. But turning now to the economy, an idea for the Chancellor to grow the economy. As President-elect Trump prepares to take office next week, there are reports that a number of wealthy, high-skilled Americans are looking to come to the UK for fear of what President-elect Trump will do to their country. But because the Conservatives so broke the immigration system, many of them are finding there's no visa that they can apply for. Now, I know the Prime Minister is rightly seeking to reduce immigration from the record highs of the Conservative. But does he agree, if people like this want to come to our country, to bring their money and their skills so we can grow our economy and pay for our public services, they should be able to?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we welcome all investment into the United Kingdom, and I'm very pleased we've had record investment in the time that we've been in office and continue to welcome investors and investment to this country. But he's absolutely right. The last government lost control of immigration as they lost control of health and the economy and the borders and everything else. And it was, of course, the Leader of the Opposition who was championing the driving up of the numbers. So we will bring those numbers down. We'll get it back under control. We'll encourage investment.
Christine Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dental deserts mean that routine dental checkups and treatment is often unavailable in local communities. In my constituency, we've had a dedicated space for dental practice in the Blackburn Partnership Centre since 2018, but NHS Lothian has been unable to secure a dental practice. What steps will the Prime Minister take to work with devolved governments to improve access to local NHS dentists across the UK?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank you for raising this issue, and it shows the state of public services under the SNP. Mr. Speaker, if you can believe it, a third of Scots struggle to access dentistry, and a quarter of Scottish children start primary school with tooth decay. That is really shocking. Clearly, there's much more the SNP should be doing. They should be ashamed. When a quarter of children are starting school with tooth decay, that is nothing to crow about. It's something to be ashamed of. Mr. Speaker, here we're delivering additional 700,000 appointments, reforming the contracts, and of course we'll work with the Scottish Government to improve the health of children in Scotland.
Jim Allister.
Given President Trump's antipathy to the EU, how does the Prime Minister hope to attain a trade deal for the whole United Kingdom in circumstances where the trade laws affecting part of the United Kingdom, namely Northern Ireland, are the EU's trade laws, and in circumstances where the laws governing goods and the standards of those that can be imported are EU laws? How, in those circumstances, can a deal be obtained for the whole United Kingdom, or is the Prime Minister only interested in a deal which would apply to GB and thereby further ostracise Northern Ireland from the Union?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member knows that controls apply only to EU goods moving into Great Britain. The overwhelming majority of goods moving between Northern Ireland and Great Britain will continue to enjoy unfettered access to Great Britain indefinitely. The honourable member's made much of mutual enforcement. The reality is this is mutual agreement, and I know he's got his proposal, but I think his proposal would lead in the end to a hard border, and that's something that has been rejected across this House on many occasions, and for good reason.
Brown Lishman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the general election campaign, Labour leadership promised that if we won, we would step in and save the Grangemouth refinery, retain those jobs and invest in its future. 6 months later, this hasn't happened yet. If the refinery closes, then thousands of jobs will be lost and Scotland's national security will become massively weaker. Now that we are in power, I know that the government should use it to intervene and save the refinery jobs, protect Scotland and deliver on the promise to build Grangemouth for the future. Will the Prime Minister do that?
This is a really important point, Mr. Speaker, because before July there was no plan at all to support the workers at Grangemouth. Within weeks, and importantly, we announced a £100 million deal for a growth deal, and we're jointly funding Project Willow to find a viable long-term future. It is a really serious point. I take it very seriously, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that viable long-term future is there for the workers, for their communities, and all that rely on it.
Dr. Danny Chambers.
Mr. Speaker, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has led to the emergence of bacteria that are severely resistant to multiple antibiotics, and this is now seriously delaying the return of injured soldiers back to the front line. But just like Mr. Putin, we know that these superbugs do not respect national borders, and it is only a matter of time until we start to detect them in our NHS hospitals, and we know that antimicrobial resistance is a huge challenge facing us at the moment.
Will the Prime Minister consider supporting the Ukrainian war effort by providing rapid diagnostic tests which can be used in the field and in civilian hospitals, which would not only enable us to diagnose and treat these resistant infections more quickly, returning soldiers back to the front line more quickly, but will also provide valuable surveillance data to help global public health and protect our NHS from these dangerous bacteria?
I thank him for raising this, and he knows our support for Ukraine is ironclad. Mr. Speaker, we are funding NHS doctors and nurses to work closely with their Ukrainian counterparts to share best practice, including how to prevent the spread of infections and AMR. Through the World Health Organization, we're also strengthening Ukraine's health system to provide better care, and we'll continue to do so.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Employment Rights Bill is urgently needed, especially given the exploitation of gig workers, like those retail assistants employed through apps, with vital rights denied and staff being charged a premium should they want to be paid on time. Insecure work denies workers their rights, but the TUC has also said it costs the economy around £10 billion a year. So will the Prime Minister agree with me that having a single status of worker will help end such abusive practices, give workers security and significantly benefit the economy?
I thank him for raising this. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe everyone is entitled to fair, flexible and secure working. And that's why we introduced our Employment Rights Bill, which is the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation. It includes measures that will end the scandal of fire and rehire, preventing exploitative zero-hour contracts and introducing basic rights for more workers from day one, secure wages, secure jobs and ensuring workers have the rights that they deserve at work.
Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Age UK Leicestershire have done a sterling job over the last few months, supporting pensioners who have lost the winter fuel payment as a result of his government's budget. They now face a staggering £400,000 increase in their costs as a result of the increase in national insurance. What advice can the Prime Minister give to charities like Age UK, who now have to decide whether to cut jobs or slash services to some of the most vulnerable in society?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the advantage, I suppose, of the Leader of the Opposition having no policies is that they can say completely contradictory things without breaching their policy. But they want the benefits of the budget, but none of the tough measures to support the budget. We have, Mr. Speaker, we've taken the decision in relation to pension credit and pension allowances, but because of our commitment to the triple lock, there will be an upgrade in April of this year of £460. But, Mr. Speaker, what I noticed that before Christmas, the Shadow Chancellor said that the triple lock is unsustainable. Unsustainable. So that's their position. Pensions going up under this government because committing to the triple lock unsustainable is their argument.
Ray Morris.
Later this month, the constituency will mark the anniversary of the tragic murder of Holly Newton. Will the Prime Minister and Home Secretary look urgently at the calls from Holly's mother, Michaela Trusser, to lower the age that a person can be recognised as a victim of domestic abuse?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable member for raising this tragic case? And it is a really important issue. We've seen an increase in violence in teenage relationships in the last decade. And, Mr. Speaker, I've been continually shocked by research that shows that at a younger and younger age, there's abuse in relationships. So we do need to look at this at the earliest opportunity to how we properly protect girls. But I'm very grateful that this tragic case has been raised.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Since becoming a Labour leader, has the Prime Minister ever discussed or communicated with Philippe Sands KC about the Chagos Islands?
Yes.
No.
Prime Minister. I'll get him in. I'll get you in, yeah. Right. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. York is an incredible city, but demands on tourist destinations like York, where we received over 9 million visitors and 1.7 million overnight stays, places significant pressure on local public services and housing used as short-term holiday lets. What steps will the Prime Minister take to equip local authorities to better balance the benefits of tourism with the additional costs to our communities?
Well, Mr. Speaker, tourism is vital to our economy, and particularly in cities like York. Places can already choose to introduce a voluntary levy on overnight stays. Our focus is supporting industry, including by providing a 40% relief for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, and permanently lowering their rates from next April.
Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Margaret from Stockton is furious. Stockton's Labour Council are axing her weekly bin collection, scrapping free high street parking and closing her local recycling centre, all while employing a ridiculous number of people on £100,000 salaries. But she's even more furious because they're taking on another one behind closed doors, probably in a darkened room. They've created a new interim role for the managing director's best mate on £900 a day. It's never been approved by the council. Wow. It's never been advertised as a job. Margaret's right to be angry, isn't she, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure Margaret would be very pleased to see the incredible investment that's going into the area, the 4,000 jobs which is growing the economy. The state of our local councils was left completely damaged after the last government. She knows that. Everybody knows that.
Graham Morris.
Thanks. You never have too many Morrises. To its credit, in its first budget, this Labour government transferred the Mine Workers Pension Scheme Investment Reserve Fund, benefiting nearly 4,000 former miners and miners' widows in my constituency. However, almost 700 British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme pensioners in my constituency were excluded. Will the Prime Minister correct this injustice and ensure BC SSS beneficiaries, many now elderly and in very poor health, are treated equally to their co-workers in the MPS?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for his dedicated campaigning on this issue? I am proud that this government has overturned a historic injustice, boosting the pensions of over 100,000 former mine workers. We are, Mr. Speaker, working closely with the coal staff trustees to consider their proposal, and I'll ensure the Industry Minister keeps him fully updated.
Joe Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents on the Isle of Wight are entirely reliant on foreign-owned, debt-laden, unregulated ferry companies for essential travel. But in the United Kingdom, public transport is regulated and subsidised, like buses, trains, Scottish ferries. Does the Prime Minister agree with me this Isle of Wight anomaly must come to an end? And will the government intervene in order to protect passengers from excessive ferry prices and bad services?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this, and he's right. The ferry services for his constituents have simply not been good enough, and I know that both he and my honourable friend, the member for the Isle of Wight West, share a commitment to ensuring their constituents receive a better service. The Maritime Minister has met the ferry and hovercraft operators, the leader of the Council and other stakeholders. There will be further meetings, and I'll make sure that he is fully informed by the Minister of the progress on this issue for his constituents.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year marks the 850th anniversary of my home city of Glasgow. One of the key aims of the celebration is to speed up ambitions around the City Council's grand challenge of tackling poverty and inequality and of increasing prosperity and opportunity, themes that chime very clearly with this government's agenda too. So will the Prime Minister join with me in congratulating Glasgow on this milestone, and does he agree with me that people really do make Glasgow?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank her for raising this. Glasgow is a great city, and I'm very happy to join with her in congratulating the people of Glasgow on the 850th anniversary. They have made and will continue to make a huge contribution to this country.
Jack Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Today marks 467 days in captivity for Avinatan Or, just one of the over 100 hostages Hamas still cruelly hold. Avinatan is my age. He has his whole life ahead of him. I felt the raw pain of his family when his mum, Ditsa, a British citizen, shared her story with me as part of the Twin a Hostage campaign. Can the Prime Minister assure me he is doing everything in his power to ensure all the hostages are returned, so Avinatan can be at home where he belongs with Ditsa and his girlfriend, Noah?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for raising this case. It's appalling that Hamas continue to detain Avinatan and other hostages, including Emily Damari, and I know he's spent time with the families, and it is nothing short of torture what they are going through, and we will do absolutely everything in our power to ensure that we make progress in bringing these hostages home, and I'm sure I speak for everybody in the House, but we will do everything to try and make sure that we get those hostages home.
Final question, Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Richard Lee, has waited over 43 years for answers about the disappearance of his daughter, Catrice, from a military base in Germany in 1981. She was just 2 years old. The Royal Military Police, the MOD and successive governments have failed to get answers that he deserves, throwing up barrier after barrier to justice. Will the Prime Minister agree to meet with Richard and myself to finally give this Hartlepool veteran a way forward to uncover the truth about the disappearance of his daughter?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this deeply distressing case, and our thoughts and sympathies are obviously with Richard Lee and his family. The Defence Serious Crime Unit, Mr. Speaker, continue to appeal for new evidence in this case, and I will make sure he has a meeting with the appropriate minister to discuss progress. Thank you.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We'll let the front benches change over. Right, we now come to the urgent question. Dr. Neil Hudson.
Ask the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs if he will make a statement on the government's emergency contingency response to the recent confirmation of foot and mouth disease in Germany.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. The whole House will be aware of the concern felt across rural communities about the potential threat of foot and mouth disease. Because foot and mouth disease is a severe, highly contagious viral disease of livestock that, as we know, can have a significant economic impact and a truly devastating effect on farming and rural communities when outbreaks occur, as we know from past history. Now, I can assure the House the UK is currently free of foot and mouth disease and has been since 2007. But following the confirmation on the 10th of January of foot and mouth disease in the German state of Brandenburg, DEFRA has taken rapid action to protect the UK, including suspending the commercial import of susceptible animals from Germany and restricting personal imports of animal products from across the European Union. And I can assure the House the government will do whatever it takes to protect our nation's farmers from the risk posed by foot and mouth. Risk levels in the UK we have increased to medium. And last night, the Chief Veterinary Officer and I spoke directly with the federal German minister and his officials. The government has taken decisive and immediate action. The import of cattle, pigs and sheep from Germany has been stopped to protect farmers and protect their livelihoods. We will not hesitate to add additional countries to the list if the disease spreads. And I can inform the House that the Chief Veterinary Officer this morning has confirmed that while Germany's surveillance continues to be ongoing, they have not as yet detected any further cases. Now, foot and mouth disease guidance is available on government.uk, and livestock farmers are urged to be extra vigilant and report any suspect disease to APHA immediately. And the UK Chief Veterinary Officer is also urging livestock keepers to remain vigilant to the clinical signs of FMD. I reiterate, there are no cases in the UK currently. I would also reassure the House that FMD poses no risk to human or food safety, but it is a highly contagious viral disease of cattle, sheep, pigs and other cloven-hoofed animals. Livestock keepers should therefore be absolutely rigorous about their biosecurity. And the government is absolutely focused on responding to the animal disease threats we face, protecting animal health and welfare. Upholding high biosecurity standards is paramount to protecting and promoting food production and food safety, both animal and human, and support our economy and trade. And that's why we've invested a further £200 million in the UK's main research and laboratory testing facilities at Weybridge to bolster protection against animal disease. Now, whilst we stand ready to protect our livestock from the threat of foot and mouth disease and other exotic disease, we also offer our support to our European neighbours as they face this threat to their livestock, farming and rural communities. I can assure the House the government will be decisive and take the necessary action to protect our farmers from foot and mouth disease.
Minister Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this question. I declare a strong personal and professional interest. As a veterinary surgeon, I supervised some of the animal culls in the 2001 outbreak, witnessing sights I never want to see again in my lifetime, Mr. Speaker. The confirmation on January the 10th of foot and mouth disease in Germany, with subsequent slaughter and movement restrictions, is sending shockwaves around Europe and the UK. We have requested this question as no statement has been provided to the House on Monday or Tuesday. My colleague, the Shadow DEFRA Secretary, is not able to be with us today as she is at the Llama Show in Birmingham speaking to agricultural manufacturers and farmers. In 2001, the foot and mouth outbreak resulted in more than 6 million animals being culled and cost £12.8 billion in today's prices. It devastated the farming community, and farmers want reassurance that action is being taken to protect our borders, their livestock and their livelihoods. The mental health impacts of foot and mouth, Mr. Speaker, cannot be overstated. Can the Minister reassure us that the announced movement restrictions are fully in place for animals and products coming to the UK from the affected area? Will the government think about extending the ban to personal imports of meat and milk products unless accompanied by veterinary documentation? And can he update us on the work tracing possible movements of products from Germany? Also, what advice is there about movement of people and vehicles from the area in terms of fomite transmission of the virus? And heaven forbid, Mr. Speaker, if foot and mouth ever entered the United Kingdom, what is the situation regarding vaccine supply and potential deployment? Finally, I want to again pay tribute to the chief vets, the veterinary, animal officers, scientists and officials at the Animal and Plant Health Agency who do so much to keep our country biosecure. This foot and mouth disease wake-up call is yet more evidence that the government must now commit to fully fund the redevelopment of the APHA HQ in Weybridge. I call and I urge the government from the bottom of my heart, Mr. Speaker, to fully fund that redevelopment, to make sure that the burning pyres of slaughtered animals, as well as the economic and mental health devastation of foot and mouth disease, remain resolutely confined to the history books.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I fully appreciate the expertise and the passion that the honourable gentleman brings to this subject. He knows of what he speaks. I hope I have, in my initial reply, made it clear just how seriously the government takes these issues. I spoke to him earlier this morning ahead of a previous piece of legislation making it clear that we would work in a cross-party basis to tackle this should this come to our shores. I'll try and address the questions he raised, particularly around vaccination, because I know that that is an issue which is always raised and is always of concern. We're absolutely ready in case that is a control that we need to implement, but the advice in general is that with regards to control measures, if an outbreak were to occur in the UK, in addition to culling and immediate movement controls, vaccination is a control option that will be considered by DEFRA and devolved administrations at the outset of any outbreak. I can also assure him that the UK Vaccine Bank holds vaccines for a range of foot and mouth disease stereotypes. I can also assure him that there is good close working with the devolved administrations to make sure that we are working in harmony on this. On the movement of goods of personally carried goods, I can also remind him that this government strengthened those controls at the borders, and I'm confident that we are doing everything it is possible to do at the moment to make sure that we are following the right procedures given the risk assessments that have been put in place. Obviously, our sincere hope is that this does not extend beyond the Brandenburg area, but we are absolutely ready to deal with those issues. As I've said, in terms of the investment at Weybridge, we have committed an initial £200 million. This is a debate we have been having over some time, but I'm afraid we are working with the resources we have now, and I'm confident we have a very good set of procedures in place to tackle any potential incursion.
Julia Mims.
Mr Speaker, and can I thank the honourable member for Epping Forest's concern and passion on this subject. I, like him, know only too well the devastation that was caused in 2001. Indeed, the honourable member had the privilege of representing a large part of what is now the Carlisle constituency. Cumbria was the worst affected part of the country in 2001. 30% of the culled cattle at that time were from Cumbrian farms. So can I ask the Minister just to elaborate on what steps are being taken to ensure that our farmers and their livestock are protected ahead, God forbid, of any potential future outbreak?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for the question and for the concern that she raises quite rightly. As I said at the outset of my response, we are well aware of the concern that people have. But people should be reassured that we have very good tracing facilities these days. The technologies have improved, and I think what is particularly important is that we are in very close contact with our German colleagues who are sharing advice on a regular basis. So everything that can be done is being done, but I absolutely recognise the concerns that people have.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Tim Farrell.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr Speaker, I confess, I think all of us in Westmoreland and across rural Britain feel a sense of terror, actually, at this news as we recall the devastation and horror of the outbreak of 2001. I will never forget that looming sense of dread and threat as the disease got closer to our farms, the dread when the disease was diagnosed as whole herds and flocks were slaughtered by those who had cared for them. I won't forget the burning fires on the hillsides of the bodies of the slaughtered animals, or the deep trauma that affected all of our communities, but especially our children. We must do everything to avoid a repeat. So can the Minister explain why this outbreak was notified on Friday and yet DEFRA only issued instructions to prevent imports from the affected areas yesterday, when countries like Mexico and South Korea were able to act over the weekend? Does he acknowledge the need now to invest in APHA and the new laboratory urgently and undo the delay of the previous government? Does he accept that the failure of the last government, and so far his government, to sign a veterinary and phytosanitary agreement with the EU increases the risk of biosecurity and to British farmers? Will he act swiftly to put this right? And finally, would he meet urgently with the noble Lord Curry, who headed the inquiry after the 2001 outbreak, so that we are ready and have learned all the lessons of previous failures, so that our farms, our rural communities, our animal welfare are protected at all costs?
It's very important. I had the first case of foot and mouth that was detected in that year, so I know all about it. But we must stick to the times that's been allocated. Let's try Lizzie Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In 2000... Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I say I'm always happy to speak to Lord Curry. He brings huge expertise and knowledge to this. Can I just say that on that issue of delay, there was no delay. Essentially, as soon as we were informed, we put the appropriate processes in place, and goods that were staff at border control points were issued instructions to hold goods at the border. So everything that was done as quickly as possible. I hear his point about our relationship with the German government. What I can assure him is I personally know the German minister. I spoke to him personally yesterday, and we are getting every cooperation needed from the German government.
Lucy Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In 2001, I lived in North Cumbria, and I will never, ever forget the sights of burning livestock in my friends' fields. Can the Minister assure me that my farmers in Morecambe and Loonsdale, who are by far and large livestock farmers, will never have to face that terrible scene again, and that we will do everything we possibly can to ensure foot and mouth does not spread to our country? Thank you.
Minister.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend again for her comments and for her account of the effect it had on her constituents. And the purpose of my statement, or my response to the question today, is to give reassurance to people that we have very, very high quality officials working very, very hard to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent such an outbreak again.
Chair of the Select Committee, Alistair Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As well as my own entry in the Register of Members' Interests, I should tell the House that my wife is a practising veterinary surgeon who occasionally is contracted to provide local veterinary official services to the Animal and Plant Health Agency. I too remember the events of 2001, and I remember, having just been elected, the debates that we had in this House, and we said we must always learn the lessons and never forget, but in truth, frankly, we have done. And the extent to which we are exposed today is something for which there is responsibility shared across the parties. The state of the APHA headquarters in Weybridge is a disgrace, and it is now an urgent disgrace. Hopefully, this is a bullet that we will dodge, but if we do, we know that there is also the risk of African swine fever, blue tongue, avian influenza all coming. Is this the point where, across the House, we can all agree on the importance of biosecurity and the importance of funding it?
Well, I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for his point. I think we all know how important biosecurity is, and that is why the Government committed that further £200 million, that very important facility in Weybridge.
Richard Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister confirm what mitigation funding has been made available to farms that may be affected, and also can he commit to look urgently at the provision of an abattoir on the Isle of Wight, because we don't currently have one?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. It's a good try. Obviously, at the moment, we're talking about an outbreak in Germany. Should there be, and obviously we're doing everything we can to prevent an outbreak in the UK, we'll come back forward with further proposals. But at the moment, we are working hard to make sure that does not happen.
Simon Paul.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister confirm that, given the seriousness of the issues, that when in doubt, the precautionary principle will come to the fore and urgency and the proper decisions will be taken? And given the shared land border with the island of Ireland and the trade there, he's mentioned that working with the Devolves. Can he also confirm what conversations he may have had or may be planning to have with the government in Dublin?
Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his question, and he's absolutely right. We will, of course, take every precaution and apply the precautionary principle. And in terms of Northern Ireland, we treat them in the same way, of course, as the devolved administrations, and my colleague is having conversations later today.
Alison Newham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the statement, and I know that the news is of worry to farmers in my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby. Would the Minister be able to share with the House more details about the funding that's available from his department to help prevent new animal diseases?
Minister.
Well, again, I thank my honourable friend for her point and her concern. We have an extensive set of facilities and agencies who are tasked with protecting our country on these issues. I have every confidence in the Chief Veterinary Officer and her officials in the Animal and Plant Health Agency, subject to the issues that have been raised around long-term funding, but we have good protections in place and people should have confidence in them.
To Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and yet again we rely on the fantastic people and Animal and Plant Health Agency, which is based in Newhall in my constituency, despite its slightly confusing name. Would the Minister join with me in terms of thanking the people working there? And does he agree with me that it urgently needs investment to improve the facilities? I don't think he's visited the APHA, but would you join me on a tour as soon as we can arrange, just to see for himself just the state that it's in and what improvements are urgently needed?
I'm always grateful for invitations from honourable members and feel I'm permanently on tour, but he's right, I've not yet had the opportunity to visit, although the Secretary of State has. But last week when I was at a conference in York, very senior officials from the APHA gave me a very detailed briefing on the work that they do. So I share the thanks to those people. They play a huge role in keeping our country safe.
Louise Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a child, I distinctly remember the creeping fear on my family's farms as foot and mouth felt that it crept ever closer, which I realised even as a child, and I feel sick just thinking that we could ever go back there. Many farmers in my constituency have repeatedly raised their concerns over infectious diseases entering the UK. Please can the Minister assure me and them that we're doing everything to take this very seriously and have contingency plans in place? Thank you.
Minister.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend again for reflecting on the awful experiences of 20 years ago, and I can assure her that we have excellent people, exactly as I've just been referring to, who are working extremely hard to minimise the risk of any further outbreak, and we're doing everything we can to prevent that happening.
Colin Lockhart.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister not agree with me that it is a preposterous situation that Northern Ireland has been excluded from the UK ban on imports from Germany because of the outbreak of foot and mouth there? And would you agree with me that it is the tip of the iceberg with regards to the impact that the Windsor Framework and Protocol is continuing to have on our agri-food industry in Northern Ireland, since he thinks, and rightly so, it is essential to protect GB farms from potentially devastating impacts? Why does he think and believe that Northern Ireland farms are not as important?
Minister.
Northern Ireland farms are just as important, and in Northern Ireland the controls will apply to meat and live animals moving from a 3-kilometre protection zone and 10-kilometre surveillance zone surrounding the affected premises in Germany. Those products cannot be moved to Northern Ireland.
Sally Jameson. Deputy Speaker, can the Minister outline what measures are being taken to ensure that no animals have been infected by the outbreak in Germany end up in this country?
Minister.
I can assure my honourable friend that this is an unusual outbreak in the sense it's not clear. It's a very small herd of water buffalo, 20 of them. What is unknown at the moment to the German authorities is how they got infected in the first place. So there's obviously extensive work going on in Germany to try and understand that. The difference, I guess, from 20 years ago is we have much better science now in terms of being able to trace the particular where it might have come from. So obviously extensive work is going on across Europe because this is a threat to the entire continent. So I can assure that every avenue is being explored to try and make sure we understand how this has happened to make sure it goes no further.
Sarah Dyke.
Deputy Speaker, as a farmer's daughter, I fully remember the sickening impact of the last foot and mouth outbreaks across Somerset and Dorset, and particularly on farmers' mental health. Those culling restrictions resulted in 73% of farmers experiencing depression and anxiety following the last outbreak. And now almost 1/2 of the farming community are already experiencing anxiety. So what plans does the government have to support farmers who may be impacted with this disease or indeed any other biosecurity risk?
Minister.
Again, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I know she takes these issues very, very seriously, and we've discussed them before. Let me be clear here. This is an outbreak in Germany at the moment. We are doing everything we can to make sure it does not extend into our country. But, of course, people are concerned and worried. Should it develop further, which we're absolutely determined to make sure doesn't happen, then, of course, we'll be looking at further measures to help and support people. But we are not at that stage at the moment.
Claire Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his responses? It's very reassuring, I think, that the seriousness of this situation is felt across the House and all across the country. Could I just ask, I know you talked about working with the devolved administrations, but just some further points on how you will work with the Welsh Government in particular to address this issue?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question and her concern. Look, I can assure her that we have an extremely close relationship with the Welsh Government. Minister Hugh Aranka-Davis and I speak frequently. In fact, we were only speaking at the Oxford Farming Conference a few days ago, and we're in regular contact on issues like these. So anything we do, we will be working together on an entire United Kingdom basis.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With some of the most productive grassland in the UK, Dumfries and Galloway is terrified, not worried by this outbreak, and I'm reassured that we are doing what we can, but it is a very difficult problem to solve. Can the Minister reassure me, though, that the Republic of Ireland will not be the unlocked back door through which this dread disease returns to this country?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and I absolutely also welcome his appreciation of the complexities that we face, but it is in everybody's interest to make sure that we stop this, and we are all cooperating closely together. The veterinary officials have a very good network, and they are working closely. No one wants this to extend further.
James Naish.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the son of a farmer, I remember only too well waking up in the early morning to come down to listen to Radio 4 in silence as a family, as we heard about more and more animals being culled during the crisis in the early 2000s. Can I therefore ask the Minister what steps are being taken to engage the NFU and other trade bodies to prepare for any outbreak here in the UK?
Minister.
Again, I thank my honourable friend for his concern and his recollections. I can assure him, in fact, yesterday we were having a round table to discuss the threat posed by blue tongue, and we are obviously in constant dialogue with all those who have direct interest and expertise. We'll be working in lockstep.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In his initial answer, the Secretary of State talked about protecting the UK. He spoke about our nation's farmers. Part of the advice he gave was to look to .gov.uk. .gov.uk gives advice to Scottish farmers, to English farmers, to Welsh farmers, but not to Northern Ireland farmers. So the Secretary of State, can I ask you, why have you abandoned Northern Ireland farmers? The last outbreak in 2001 cost the Northern Ireland economy £24.2 million. To talk about that small region in Germany that can't export to Northern Ireland, would the Secretary of State not agree it would be better putting in an entire ban from German products into Northern Ireland, the same as the rest of the United Kingdom?
Minister.
We stand with farmers across the entire United Kingdom. The circumstances are slightly different for reasons that the honourable gentleman will understand, which is why we have to provide appropriate advice. But we are working absolutely in tandem and lockstep with colleagues across Europe to beat this horrible disease.
Luke Charters.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recently visited the Animal and Plant Health Agency in Weybridge, and it's their critical work that will prevent foot and mouth from reaching our shores. The £200 million the government announced for the APHA is welcome, but will my honourable friend commit to reviewing the APHA's funding, particularly in the event of multiple concurrent diseases happening at the same time?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his observations, and absolutely, of course, we constantly keep under review the resources that we have available to tackle all these issues, and I'm very happy. I'll be very happy, I think, now on the basis of a number of interventions to visit Weybridge at the earliest opportunity.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister will know that, unfortunately, foot and mouth disease looms large in the memory of many Shropshire farmers. And I just wondered whether, talking about visits, whether a genuine point, whether the Minister and indeed the Secretary of State would consider visiting Harper Adams University, my constituency, which he will know is the top agricultural university in Europe. And the reason I mention that is they do have veterinary experts that have a particular expertise in this disease and others. But as the Shadow Minister stated, pigs, cattle, sheep, over 6 million lost in 2001 and 2007. And he mentioned biodiversity. I just wonder whether you could give an update to the House on illegal imports of meat and their checks at the border and the implementation of the border target operating model.
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his question and also for his invitation. I shall add him to my list. On the checks at the borders, that is a complicated set of issues, but one of the Brexit benefits, if you like, is we actually have checks at the borders, and I'm confident that they are giving us a level of security that should give people confidence. And as I said in an earlier answer, we've actually strengthened those controls on personal imports. So obviously it is always a challenge to protect any area, but we are in a better position than colleagues in mainland Europe.
Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's really good to see this cross-party support for increased investment in Weybridge, because this has long been needed. But to touch on my honourable friend's point from Orkney on biosecurity, we know that there's lots of illegally imported meat coming through our ports, and it is a huge biosecurity risk, even more so if there is foot and mouth on the continent. Can we ensure that, along with investing in Weybridge and improving those facilities, we look at how we resource the port authorities properly to catch all this illegally imported meat?
Minister.
The honourable gentleman makes an important point, and clearly we all try and do everything we can to make sure that illegal imports are intercepted and stopped. I'm delighted to see there's an outbreak of cross-party consensus on the need to invest more. I hope there's also an outbreak of consensus on how to fund it.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency was one of the most significantly impacted in the 2001 outbreak. Virtually every hoofed animal within Dumfriesshire was slaughtered, and the smoke from the pyre hung over particularly the Annan Valley for days. A large part of the market in livestock in my constituency is in the Honourable Lady from Carlisle's constituency at the Longtown market, which was a source of the previous outbreak. Will he ensure that we're working closely with the Scottish Government, because there is a significant amount of cross-border movement of animals, and that needs to be properly identified and regulated?
Minister.
The right honourable gentleman speaks with passion and paints a vivid picture of that dismal period. I remember it well, sadly. And I can give him an absolute assurance that he will know from his time in government that at official level in particular, the veterinary officers work very, very closely together. This is an absolute shared endeavour, and we'll be absolutely doing everything we can to make that there's that close cooperation that is needed.
Anne Davis.
Diolch, Madam Deputy Llefarydd. As a dairy farmer, the devastating outbreak of foot and mouth over 20 years ago was on my doorstep. We were very lucky as a family farm, but sadly others within my farming community in Wales were not. The outbreak was also a food security issue, understood to derive from food waste fed to pigs. So can the Minister inform me what lessons the UK Government has learned from that outbreak to better secure our food chains and to keep our livestock safe and food supplies safe?
I thank the Honourable Lady, and again I recognise the hurt that she recollects from that dreadful time before. Clearly there was a lot of work that was done in the light of those events. Lessons have been learned, technology has changed and improved. I think it's probably worthy of a longer debate to go into all the lessons that have been learned, but it is very, very important that we act on the lessons that were learned. We do not want a repeat of what happened in 2001.
John Lamont.
Thank you very much. Like many other members, I very clearly remember the events of 2001 and the last foot and mouth outbreak, not least because all the cattle and sheep on my family farm, my father's family farm in Berwickshire, were slaughtered. The emotional trauma will stay with farming communities for many, many years to come. I'm reassured that the Government is engaging with the Scottish Government on this, but is the Minister also speaking to the National Farmers Union in Scotland and local authorities to ensure that they're able to support farming communities in the best way possible?
Again, the honourable gentleman speaks with passion and conviction about that dreadful time, and I fully respect that. What I should say to the House is the outbreak was notified on Friday. We're on Wednesday. Absolutely, of course, we're ready to move to the next stage should it be necessary. But at this point, the key priority has got to be making sure that we keep this disease out of our country, and that is where the attention is focused at the moment. In the dismal possibility that we have to move to measures within our country, then of course we'll be working very, very closely with everyone that needs to be involved.
Rachel Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, I'd genuinely like to say that
I'm sure my farmers, like myself, will be hugely grateful to know that this is going to be operational on a cross-party basis. Our farmers are more important than party politics. Back in 2001, I was in fact the Liberal Democrat candidate for Totnes constituency. And the only thing that made it easier for my farmers to understand what was going on was the amount of communication that I had done with them before the outbreak happened, because of course one wasn't able to go on a farm once the outbreak happened. So could I encourage you to communicate as much with farmers as you possibly can during this very difficult time? Thank you.
Minister.
Again, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for her recollections of the time before. Again, can I reiterate, we are at the point of trying to make sure that this does not arrive on our shores. Should that happen, then of course we move to a different phase. We're not at that point yet. And it is important to reassure people that we have excellent measures, excellent people in place working very, very hard to make sure we do not get to that point.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the government's efforts in bringing us up to speed today, but also in imposing the import ban. In terms of the import ban, I recognise that this is for projects from Germany, but does it capture projects which maybe originate from Germany, but the point of import is outside of Germany? And also, what steps is the government taking to increase spot testing or screening proactively across the country so we can get ahead of any outbreak if it were to come?
Minister.
We're applying all the rules that we can to make sure it is the German products that we're excluding at the moment. But it is quite a complex set of supply chains within the European Union. The key priority is live animals, and they have been. And I was going to say fortuitous. There's nothing fortuitous about blue tongue, but there have actually been restrictions in place on movements for some time. So we are probably better protected than we might have been because of that already. So what we cannot say for sure is that nothing moves across the continent and comes into the country, which is why it's very important that people are vigilant as well to make sure, because should it cross the channel, then speed will be the essence to make sure that we shut it down. But I am confident from talking to the Chief Vet and her officials and the conversations with German colleagues that everything that can be done is being done. So I hope that reassures her.
Caroline Bowden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure nobody in Devon will forget the horror of 2001 when half of the farms in the county were affected by foot and mouth. Is it the situation at the moment in Germany, does that give the Minister impetus to try and move forward with securing a veterinary deal with the European Union?
Minister.
We don't need any extra impetus. It's a government commitment to get a better deal. But what I can say to the Honourable Lady is that actually the relationship with our German colleagues at the moment is excellent, and they're giving us the full cooperation that we need.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The outbreak of foot and mouth disease in Germany is a timely reminder of the livestock diseases that threaten the UK every day, and the Minister has said he'll take every precaution available to him. So will he use this opportunity to permanently ban all personal imports of meat and ensure that both the public health authorities and border force are resourced to tackle the illegal meat importation?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. We spoke frequently when he was in his previous role, when I was in opposition. Again, he knows of what he speaks. We have strong measures in place. We actually strengthened them a few months ago, and I'm confident that they are at the right level at the moment. Certainly, of course, there's always a case for further investment. I'm sure the Honourable Gentleman will be supporting any measures that we bring forward.
Jim Allister.
Does the Minister accept that the reason why he cannot provide a national protection to Northern Ireland as well as the GB is because this House has surrendered the right to make these regulations for Northern Ireland? They can't even be made in Stormont because only a foreign parliament is now entitled to make them. And therefore, we in Northern Ireland do not, for our farmers and their livelihoods, have the protections that are afforded elsewhere, and see a ban only restricted to the immediate area from Germany. Within that context, are we going to see the absurdity that we've seen under blue tongue, that cattle and livestock from mainland Europe can transit through GB, despite a ban in respect of blue tongue, can transit through GB to Northern Ireland and indeed anywhere in the island of Ireland? Is that same loophole going to apply here?
Minister.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman as we continue our dialogue on this issue. I don't recognise that loophole, and I can assure him that Northern Ireland will be fully protected, because that is what we are determined to do.
David Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Farmers in my constituency of Brecon, Radnor and Cumtower are very concerned by this news, as Powys is one of the hardest hit regions by the 2001 outbreak, and the trauma remains for the 2,000 livestock farmers who were affected. Can the Minister update us with some further details on the conversations he has had with the Welsh Government, and will he commit that the Welsh Government will commit to working with local authorities?
Minister.
Again, I thank the honourable gentleman again for not just for the question, but for the concern he expressed about his constituents who suffered so grievously before. The detailed level of conversations around these issues is conducted between the veterinary officers, and the veterinary officers have a very, very close network. Any political decisions that need to be made will be made by ministers, and I have a very close relationship with Minister Davis. If further action is needed, we will be working together to stop any further incursions.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Shropshire, dairy and other livestock farmers have been having a torrid time recently, and they will have read this news with a sense of dread. I'm also an officer on the All-Party Group for Food Security, and we recently heard some eye-watering evidence from the border authorities at Dover about illegal meat imports and the threat that they pose to UK biosecurity. Can the Minister explain to the House what assessment he's made of the problems with that process, and what he intends to do to ensure that diseases like foot and mouth don't arrive in the UK?
Minister.
Well, again, I thank the honourable lady for the concern that she expresses, and I repeat the points I made earlier about the border controls that we have in place. Of course, we've been aware, I'm afraid this has been a long-running issue, but we have much stronger border controls in place than we would have done in previous times, and we're working hard with the Port Health authorities to make sure that we crack down on illegal imports of meat.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister very much for his response. Declaring interest, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a member of the Ulster Farmers Union. Indeed, I live in a farm in the Irish Peninsula where dairy farming and sheepmen surround me, so the impact upon them would be great, and for that reason I asked the Minister this question. I can well remember the pyres of dead animals and traumatised farmers who all were concerned, as they always are, about their animals. And that over 20 years ago in 2001. The lessons were hard and well learned. The Minister, I say this respectfully to the Minister, because we've had 3 other Northern Ireland MPs have asked this question, and the 4th one to ask a similar question, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think we need it clarified for farmers, for my neighbours in Northern Ireland, for all those who farm, that there will be zero tolerance of products from Germany. And will the UK-wide, including will it be UK-wide, including Northern Ireland, and that a full report will come to this House before any ban is lifted. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And again, I thank the honourable gentleman. He speaks with passion on these issues. Absolutely can give him strong assurance that the measures in place to protect farmers in Northern Ireland are strong and will be, in my view, good enough to make sure we can protect people properly. Clearly, there is a slightly different set of arrangements. He'll be well aware of that, and that is why those we have to respect. But we are getting absolute, total cooperation from our German colleagues. There will be no meat coming from those parts of Germany to Northern Ireland.
Can I thank the Minister for his responses? There might need to be a few moments, although I don't see many people leaving the chamber. So if anyone is planning to leave, please do so quickly and quietly. Urgent question, David